said, Lee, we've got a closing issue. Jack, based on what you shared with me, it doesn't sound like you have a closing issue at all.
Go on.
I'm Lee Sauls. I'm a sales management strategist, and I help companies win more deals at the prices that they want. Closing is the symptom of the real issue you're experiencing. Where's the issue? It's in opening. It's in that first meeting. If that first meeting is weak, so is the deal. Okay?
But then why doesn't that translate in the real world?
Prospecting cannot be done in mass. If your message is for everyone, it's for no one. So personalization is the absolute key when we talk about getting that first meeting.
I've been doing things wrong. Is there a way to fix that?
Discovery meetings must die.
Oh, wow.
Discovery is an egocentric interaction. It's all for us. The expression that we should embrace is the concept of a consultation. If I agree to take a meeting with you, what do I get out of it? People buy based on emotion, justify their decisions with logic. So it's differentiate or drop your price. Those are your options.
Before we get started with the episode, our books are now open.
If you need help getting in front of the right people, finding your dream customers, or winning new business, we might be able to help.
Why not outsource your sales to We Have a Meeting? Just go to wehaveameeting.com.
Lee, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Wonderful, Jack. Thank you.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you for joining us. We've been looking forward to this one. We're going to hit off with a big open question.
Wait, I gotta get ready. Okay. All right, go ahead. Fire away.
Hope you're sitting comfortably. Who are you and what problem do you solve?
Wow. How long do I have to answer that question?
Take as long as you want.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm Lee Sauls. I'm a sales management strategist, and I help companies win more deals at the prices that they want. My specialty is working with sales organizations to differentiate what and how they sell.
Nice. Okay. So if people are struggling, I think one of the things, and obviously you've got a new book about it, is probably that first interaction, that first meeting. So if they are struggling, what kind of symptoms might they be facing in their world where you kind of see it kind of going wrong?
Well, I'll give you the big one. They're not winning deals, or they're not winning them at the levels or the prices that they want. And so oftentimes I get this call from a frustrated executive. Maybe it's a business owner, maybe it's a VP of sales, and the conversation always sounds the same. So, Lee, we've got a closing issue. I'll say, well, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, tell me what's going on. They say, well, my salespeople, they tell me about deals that are imminent, that we're at the finish line, and then something goes awry and we don't get that business. The deal gets put off into some point in the future, which I know means never. We get ghosted, meaning they stop communicating with us. We get told we have to drop our prices to unacceptable levels to win it, or we just lose to the competition. All just to say we've got a closing issue. And normally it takes about 15 minutes to get this all off their chest. And after they do, I empathize again, but then I correct them. Jack, based on what you shared with me, it doesn't sound like you have a closing issue at all. Now they get annoyed. They said, Lee, weren't you listening? I just spent 15 minutes giving you chapter and verse of all these closing issues that we have. I heard every word of it. And based on what you've shared, it sounds like closing is the symptom of the real issue you're experiencing. Now they become docile and curious. Well, then where's the issue? It's in opening. It's in that first meeting. See, in that first meeting, there's so much going on, right? We're acquiring information. We're sharing information. We're differentiating ourselves. We're engaging emotion. And that first meeting is the deal foundation. If that first meeting is weak, so is the deal.
I think we might be singing off the same hymn sheet here, Lee. Let's see. Let's go a bit deeper. Where is the balance between, salespeople, they get on calls and they're like, I want to tell this guy how great I am. But then there's also the discovery part needed, right? Does this person actually have a problem we can help with? Where's the balance between those two things?
Well, when you're first reaching out to someone, most likely they're in a complacent state. They're not actively looking for an alternative. If they were, they'd be calling you. They'd be called a lead. And the mistake that we make when someone's in a complacent state is we start talking about us and what we offer. And you may as well talk to the wall. No, you're not being heard. At that moment, when you have someone in a complacent state, the entire conversation needs to be about them and the issues that they may be experiencing. And our goal is to lead them from a point of complacency to pick their head up and say, you know what? Maybe I should consider an alternative, and lead them to the other side of receptivity. Now, when they're in that state, what they want to know is, why you? And that's when the floor is open for you to position your differentiators in a meaningful way. But so often, the mistake that's made is someone's in a complacent state, and the question then is, why now? And what we're answering is, why you? And it fails. They don't want to know that then. Why do I need to do something about this issue you're calling me about now? And if we don't answer that question, click, bye-bye.
So I always think when we have these conversations, that all makes sense, right? To us three on this call, that will make sense. There's other people that have sat in your seat as guests on this podcast who have said something somewhat similar that makes sense. Okay. But then why doesn't that translate in the real world? It feels like, there's the mass market out there that are, let me do everything on Bant, or let me just try and discount. Where does it come from? What's the root cause of this?
Well, you just said it in the first word when you started explaining this. You said mass. Prospecting cannot be done in mass. If your message is for everyone, it's for no one. There's a number of studies that have been done around prospecting, and one of my favorite ones was performed by the Rain Group, and you may have heard this one. They asked executives if they have ever agreed to take a meeting with a salesperson that had reached out to them through some form of prospecting. Are you familiar with that study? Okay, then I'll put you guys on the spot. What percentage of executives do you think said, yes, I took a meeting with a salesperson that had reached out to me through some form of prospecting?
3%.
3? How about you, Jack?
I was probably going to go a little bit more optimistic, like 4 or 5.
Ooh. How about 82?
Oh, wow.
Better than 4 out of 5. Executives said, yes, I took a meeting with a salesperson that had reached out to me through some form of prospecting. But the study didn't end there. They got the secret sauce, the key ingredient to getting the meeting. What do you think that was?
Knowledge, like they knew my problem, the time they were in my market, that type of thing.
Jack, what's your guess?
I'm going to go left field, and I'm going to say some kind of ridiculous personalization.
That was the word, personalization. Personalization. So if you're sending generic emails, leaving generic voicemail messages, or heaven forbid you get someone live, you're having a generic conversation, you're not going to be in that 4 out of 5 group. So personalization is the absolute key when we talk about getting that first meeting. Like I said, if the message is for everyone, it's for no one.
Okay, so So before we dive deep onto the first meeting, and I want to make this as frameworky and practical for people. So before we get to that, let's say I've cold called you and you said, wow, you're the 3rd best cold caller I've ever met, Jack. Yeah, let's schedule some time next Tuesday. Brilliant. I've got a week in the diary. It's there. It's booked in. You've clicked attending. What should I be doing before that meeting to prepare before I sit with you?
Well, let's talk about a couple of goals we have for that meeting, right? The first one we just talked about, personalization. So I want to research the company. I want to research the role that this person is in. I want to research the individual. I want to learn as much as I can so that when we're in that first meeting, one of the things that they're feeling is that this meeting is just for them. And the meeting I have later today is going to be totally different than the meeting that I'm having with them. So that's number 1. Number 2, a salesperson's most precious commodity is time, right? None of us gets more or fewer minutes in our day. And when you look at top performers, one of the skills that they master is qualifying. And what you see so often in the sales world is salespeople will chase a deal. They'll put months and months, maybe even years going after it, and they lose it at the finish line. At least they think they did. And then when you conduct a postmortem, you come to find they didn't lose the deal. And they'll say, well, I didn't win it. Now, it's true you didn't win it, but you didn't lose it. You were never in the game. That if you would have qualified in the first 15 minutes of the first meeting, you would have recognized that you weren't a viable option for this. So if you think of all the wasted motion going after a deal that you had no chance of winning. So that's another thing that we're preparing as a part of the strategy for that first meeting. The other thing that we think about in preparation for that meeting are the questions we're going to ask, the information we're going to share, and the actions we're going to take. And one of the things I'm going after right now is something that the salespeople that have been told for an eternity, that the first meeting is a discovery meeting. And in chapter 1 of my book, The First Meeting Differentiator, it's titled Discovery Meetings Must Die. And the reason for that is if you think about how salespeople prepare for that meeting, they think about the questions they're going to ask, the information they're going to share. And one of my favorite questions to ask salespeople is, if I agree to take a meeting with you, what do I get out of it? And they'll say, well, you'll learn about my company and what we offer. That's not meaningful value. And I'll explain why. There's two types of sales, and I'm going to use a bathroom environment to depict those two. You guys ready? You buy toilet paper, I sell toilet paper. You're buying toilet paper from my competitor, and I'm saying you should be buying my toilet paper because it's superior. That's a takeaway sale, and that's the environment that most salespeople are in. The other type of sale environment, you buy toilet paper, I sell bidets. It's an alternative way of solving an issue. That's a demand generation sale. So in a takeaway sale environment, I already have a supplier. I have a provider in place. And you're telling me the meaningful value I get out of this interaction is I'm going to learn about your stuff. Well, I don't need to learn about your stuff. I already got a guy that's taking care of it for me. So what else you got? And now they struggle because they've never thought about that first meeting in the context of providing meaningful value. Discovery is an egocentric interaction. It's all for us. The expression that we should embrace is the concept of a consultation. If you think about the medical community, right, we go to the doctor for two reasons: to become wiser about our circumstances and to understand potential remedies. We sure wouldn't go there if we thought we were a science experiment. They're going to gather all this information, all this data on us, right? But we get nothing out of it. But that's what we're doing in sales. And that's what a discovery meeting is all about. Of course, the medical community, they don't refer to that meeting as discovery. They call it a consultation. And the implication there is that the person we're meeting with also has to get meaningful value out of that interaction. Now, I'm guessing your audience likes free things, right? Don't we all like free things?
Of course.
We love them.
I've got a tough URL for everybody to remember. Meaningfulvalue.com. Meaningfulvalue.com. 10 ways to provide meaningful value during first meetings. And that meaningful value, if I could summarize it, is that they're going to learn something during that time with you that either helps them in their role or helps their company. That's meaningful value. And here's the key. We talked about prospecting a few moments ago. It's really hard. It's really hard to get someone to agree to a meeting with you. Once you define what that meaningful value is, you fold that into your prospecting messaging. So Zach, when we get together, I'll share with you a best practice that operations leaders are using to creatively reduce costs. Oh, I'm going to learn something from Lee if I take that meeting. I'm in.
So I'm really enjoying this river ride that we're on. I want to continue down it, but I do want to go back to something that we started the point with. So we were talking about like research and finding out about that prospect.
Yep.
Just to play devil's advocate, how do you prevent reps from building their own bias that could actually be at some detriment to themselves?
When you say building your own bias, what do you mean by that?
So I think the issue can be with too much research, and I think this is heavier on the cold calling side, but I think it's definitely like powerful. If I go away and I do a load of research, and I know
Right.
certain things, and there's funding, and I know that this person was in this role up until this point, and if I know everything, well, then I've already built my own story, so that when I'm going into the consultation, I'm going, it doesn't really matter what you say because I feel like I probably know the answers. So how would you kind of best teach reps how to build a practical piece of evidence and the story that might be useful, but not build a bias?
Great point. It's not so much about building a bias. It's something that I think you'll agree with. Do you like to be lectured?
No.
No. Does anybody like to be lectured? No. So what we want to do is take the research that we conduct and find those points, and rather than come in and lecture them, develop thought-provoking questions that get them to think. Because as soon as they identify the issue, that they verbally share that information with you, now they own it. So it's very different than when you come in and say, so I researched your company and I see this. Well, then no need to have the meeting. But what you're trying to do is build engagement with them. So you want them to see that you did your homework. So it's a personalized experience. But you want to create questions from that rather than just come in and lecture them on all your great findings. Because the questions become very telling. Because when you create questions that show you did some homework, like, oh, okay, so you prepared for today. Is that what you were getting at, Jack? Something like that?
Yeah, absolutely nailed it. And then, so we've done that. We've kind of got to a point where we're not building biases. I think everybody will be thinking, okay, cool. I've got this first meeting. Where do I start? What is the first question? How do I introduce myself? How much small talk am I having? Are we talking about the weather, the football? What should we be doing, Lee?
Great point. So when we talk about discovery, a discovery meeting, we say, let me make my list of questions and my message points. But if you think about it, there's an infinite number of questions you can ask, and only so many someone's going to tolerate before they say, okay, enough. You could talk about your company for 16 hours, but no one's going to give you a 16-hour meeting. I don't think you'd want one anyway. But when we talk about a consultation rather than discovery, rather than starting the process by identifying questions and message points, we identify the outcomes that would be a great first meeting. In other words, we define what success is. We list, here are all the outcomes that would make for a great first meeting. And there's a chapter in my book, plus a download with it, that helps you define what success looks like from a first meeting. And once you've defined those, let's come back to what we said before. Which questions are we going to ask? Only the ones tied to the outcomes that we've identified. What message points are we going to convey? Only the ones tied to the outcomes that we've identified. So it's almost like a set project plan that we've put together.
We are entering a new era of outbound.
4 years in, We Have a Meeting has leveled up our entire offer. That's why multi-billion-pound brands trust us.
And we book meetings with Netflix, Spotify, Facebook, even Barcelona Football Club.
We've helped close deals up to 950,000.
We're doing it all. Phone, LinkedIn, email, direct mail. And there's a few weird and wonderful possibilities that we're keeping in our back pocket. So if you're struggling to get in front of the right people at the right time, inquire today.
You mentioned, I don't know if this links, Lee, you'll have to correct me if it doesn't, but you mentioned something in the book about empathetic expertise.
Yes.
Where does that come into things? Maybe you could give the listeners a bit of a flavor of what that is.
You know, that's one of my favorite topics today. There's an expression in sales, and I'm going to guess you've heard it somewhere around 4 million times. You ready? People buy based on emotion, justify their decisions with logic. Did I get it right? You've heard it 4 million times?
Yeah.
No, you've heard it 4 million and one because you just heard me say it. Now, every salesperson on the planet has heard people buy based on emotion, justify their decisions with logic. Now find a salesperson that actually puts that into practice. I'll bet you the deed to my house that if we recorded 100 first meetings across all sale types, all market segments, all around the world, 99 of that 100, if not all 100, were entire logic conversations. So every salesperson on the planet has heard that concept and no one's doing it. Well, why is that? And I struggled with that answer. And I finally had this epiphany. I have two sons that played college baseball, and I remember when they were first learning the game, and coaches would say, now the name of the game is to hit home runs. And they'd say, big smile, got it, hit home runs. Well, guess what? Until you taught them how to hit home runs, nothing changed in their game. And what we're doing with salespeople is we're preaching to them this concept. People buy based on emotion, justify their decisions with logic, and they're saying, got it. But we're not teaching them how to put this into practice. And I'll give you an example. One of the questions we commonly ask is something like, what's the biggest challenge that you face in your business today? That's a fact-based question. We're going to get information as a result of that. But what if we phrase the question like this? Zach, what is that one thing in your business, the one thing that you're like, oh, I got to figure this out? What's that one thing? I mean, here we are in a podcast, right? A fictitious environment, if you will. But you felt that question, didn't you? And the information you're going to share back with me, I'm not just going to get information. I'm going to get color, flavor, texture. I'm going to know how you feel about what you share with me. Because emotion is the deal energizer. If we're only having logic conversations and you wonder, why did my deal just stall out? Why did it go nowhere? It's because we haven't aroused enough emotion to energize that deal. And there's a lot of ways that we can do it. There's also a chapter in my book, another thing that I'm going after. We've told salespeople, you share features with benefits, right? Again, 4 million times you've heard that. And the title of that chapter is Features, Benefits, and Boredom. Again, we're back into lecturing. No one wants to sit through that. In a discovery, when we think about discovery, we think about what am I going to tell them? In a consultation, the question we ask ourselves, what do we want them to remember? What do we want them to remember? And there's countless studies that show that people remember facts when they're embedded in stories, as opposed to facts that are just thrown at them. So what we want to master is the skill of storytelling. And there's a framework that I provide in the book in how to put together effective stories. Much more memorable, much more engaging, and they're emotive stories when we put them together so they become memorable and it helps to further energize the deal.
So how does that translate then, Lee, between even the delivery that you gave then?
Yeah.
I can imagine if I'm marketing director or CEO of maybe American company, let's position it there. I might be
sure.
like, yeah, I'm in. I'm all in.
Good.
Right. But then I could be CFO in Luxembourg and be like,
Okay.
oh, don't know about that now. He got a bit American for me then for a moment.
Which part was American? Because
just the passion. We're not passionate people in Europe. We hate passion.
Interesting.
How would it translate to different ICPs or different culture? How do you switch up the delivery depending on who you're dealing with?
Well, again, a cultural consideration is very, very important. And not just culture, but also reading the individual that you're meeting with. And it doesn't matter where you are on the planet. The concept that people buy based on emotion and justify their decisions with logic is valid. It's been proven. It's not something that's open for us to discuss or to debate. The way that we go about it is going to vary based on the different cultures that we encounter.
So the storytelling into selling, I think
Yes.
we've had people on storytelling experts, and I think that there's so much with it. But I think that sometimes it's hard. People go, yeah, I'm going to start telling more stories. And then I hear them on sales calls and they're talking about the hungry caterpillar or the Gruffalo or something like that. Like they get it wrong. Could you give us an example? So say you were sitting a first call and you were thinking, okay, how do I incorporate that storytelling into this? How would you approach that?
Okay, so let's back up a step. One of the reasons why salespeople are stuck sharing features and benefits is because they don't have what I call a deal pursuit story portfolio. So if your company has been around a few years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, there's all these deals that have come to fruition. And if I wasn't a salesperson directly involved with that deal, I don't know how it came to be. So I can't use that story. So I encourage sales leaders to put that portfolio together where they have a framework for the different clients that have come in, whether it be from a particular situation they were in, outsourcing for the first time, for example. Maybe they were working with a particular competitor, a deal of this size, this industry, and you develop this portfolio and you teach it to your salespeople and have them share those stories once they learn it from that portfolio inside the four walls of your company. And they develop that mastery. And it's just like I'm sure you've heard a million times, it's part of their toolkit. So you don't share every story every time. You now have a toolkit to share the relevant stories based on the interaction that you're having.
Okay, so let's talk about. I mean, this is something that I remember my granddad saying. He said, "First impressions count." Okay, so let's talk about first impressions and what that actually means when it comes to selling. How much of that do you think it equates to the deal being done or being lost, as they might say?
Well, one of the things that I find is salespeople blow the first meeting in the first few seconds because discovery says you start that first meeting by setting an agenda. And it sounds like this. Jack, what I want to do today is ask you some questions about your business, and then I'll tell you about what we offer. What I want to do today, what we've just shown them in the first few seconds is the purpose of this meeting is for me. Thank you for coming. A consultation mindset is a question. For this to be a great use of your time, what do you want to make sure we talk about here today? And that question does two wonderful things for you. First of all, the answer to that question can chart the course for the entire meeting. And you've also just communicated to them that you genuinely care that they receive meaningful value out of your time together. See, with that discovery statement that I mentioned a moment ago, what I want to do today, rule of thumb, there's only one person in the world who cares what you want. You know who that is? It's mom.
You.
Mom.
Oh, mom.
No one else cares what you want. So we need to communicate with them. You talked about that first moment, how you start that meeting. If you make that discovery statement versus that consultation question, sets the tone. So the first one sets the tone. Okay, great. I'm going to suffer through this thing. It's entirely for the salesperson. The other sets the tone. This is going to be a collaborative experience where I'm going to learn something. I'm going to receive meaningful value out of our time together.
So we're at an interesting intersection in time, Lee. Do you see, based on what you've said so far, do you see AI as a me statement machine at mass, or do you think it allows personalization and quality at scale? What are you thinking? Where do you see the opportunity? Where do you see the problems?
Well, I'll tell you, with ChatGPT, I see it as a tremendous opportunity. If I want to personalize an experience, I can create an effective prompt in ChatGPT that's going to get me most of the way there. So very quickly, I can personalize that meeting. I can develop thought-provoking questions based on what I learned there. It's also going to point me to websites and LinkedIn profiles and all of these other things that help me prepare for that meeting. So I see it as upside potential, not a downside.
So it sounds like you don't see any con.
Any
negative?
Not if you're using the tool properly. If you're creating a prompt, and again, depends what you put in your prompt, right? If you put in a prompt that helps you to prepare for that meeting, what are the 10 biggest things CFOs are most concerned about today in the manufacturing industry? It would be very helpful for me to learn those 10, and then I can craft those 10 into questions that I can ask during that meeting.
Okay. What do you think then is better? Because salespeople will listen to this podcast and take that and run with it. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's any best practice in taking those and making them your own, or researching those first to make sure it's not made them up? And there's all sorts of stories of it making up things and filling in gaps to appease the user. Like, what are you seeing as best practices from there?
Yeah. Well, and again, you're not coming in making a statement. You say, one of the things that we are hearing from CFOs is that they're having challenges with A, B, and C. What's been your experience with those? So even though ChatGPT may say these are common issues CFOs are experiencing, I'm not going to assume that this CFO that I'm meeting with has that issue. I'm going to use that as a question I'm going to ask, which shows I've done my homework. I'm looking to personalize that experience, and I'm soliciting their input and feedback.
Our book is out now. Sales is Therapy is available everywhere for people who are looking to get better at communicating,
asking better questions, closing more deals, and bringing in more clients.
Beware, it is not for the faint of heart or for closed-minded people.
You can buy it in all good shops, links below. Nice. So we've got, obviously, doing your research and making sure you're kind of prepared before you get into the call, setting the expectations for the initial meeting, consultation over discovery. I guess when it comes to that first meeting, what else are we missing at this point, Lee?
Well, there's a number of elements to it, right? We've talked about meaningful value. We've talked about questions we need to ask, information we need to share. We talked about this construct of reverse engineering the meeting. We talked about qualifying. We talked about engaging emotion. What we haven't talked about is something else that salespeople have been told, which is if you find the pain, you're well positioned to get the deal. And I argue that's not necessarily true.
Go on. Why would sellers be wrong to assume that?
Well, the reason is, well, you use the word assume, which assume is a dangerous expression, because people will vent. People will complain. It doesn't mean they're ready to do something about it. And what's missing is taking the conversation deep enough to determine if the pain you've heard is an inconvenience or a problem. An inconvenience or a problem. Again, we'll talk about stuff. We'll complain about it. And it could be an inconvenience, meaning I'm not prepared to do anything about it. I just want to vent. It's only when things reach the level of a problem are we ready to invest time, resources, and dollars to address it. So I have an acronym for it, and I share this in the book, an acronym for PAIN: problem, action, inconvenience, neutral. If it's a problem, they're going to do something about it. If it's an inconvenience, come back 10 years from now, it'll be the same unless it's elevated to the level of a problem.
Something else that'd be interesting to ask you about is, it feels like people are finding decision-making more complex, and perhaps that's as a result of people not working from the office as much as they once did. So you might have the CEO on the call who feels like the overall decision maker. You've just gave a great example there of they're kind of bought into the problem, but there's these other stakeholders that have other drivers to get bought into to making that decision. So right. What advice or what do you see working when you kind of multi-threading in those other departments and other teams?
Yeah, and part of what we have to determine is what is driving and who is driving the decision. So based on who's driving it, we need to make sure that we understand if that individual perceives this issue as an inconvenience or a problem. I was working with an IT group, and they sell outsourced call centers, like service desk kind of thing. And when they call on these help desk managers, they may say, here's all the issues that we're experiencing, wait times, all of these things. And when we ask them, because they can't do anything about it, we ask them how the executives, the people they report to, feel about those issues, say, I don't know, which is a huge red flag because the deal goes nowhere. So we come in, we start salivating, right? Because, oh my gosh, this person's got all this pain, but they can't do anything about it. So the conversation, has to be taken deeper to understand the decision-making framework. And if they have not taken that conversation up north on the org chart, this deal is a mirage. It's nothing at the moment.
Nice. Okay. And I think that probably links nicely into, you've probably heard it. We're talking about things we've heard a million times, Lee. I'm sure you've heard this one a million times. I had a meeting with someone. They loved us. They thought we were so great. And you say, okay, what's the next steps? They're going to get back to us, loop a few people in, should hear back by the end of the month. It starts to feel like, feels a bit like you've lost something there. What are the best practices to kind of keep in control of those next steps?
Yeah, so what you're talking about is how to end that first meeting. And there's several things that we want to do as we end that first meeting. The first one, gosh, this is going to seem so simple, and it doesn't happen enough. It's to thank them. Thank them for investing time with you. They had 400 things to do, and they put that aside. If they give you 5 minutes or 15 minutes, they put that aside to meet with you. So the first thing is to thank them. The second one is to give what I call the meaningful value test. And it's a very simple question. If we think it's gone well, so Zach, how did we do today? What I'm looking to hear back is, this was a great use of time. I'm so glad we got together. That tells me that they received meaningful value from that interaction. And then this is the key part. And this, Zach, gets to what you were asking. A meeting that's gone well has to finish with two key things: a defined next step and a scheduled next interaction. Everybody's calendar is sitting right here. It's on their phone. So it's not like they have to go check some piece of paper on their desk. It's right there. It's with them. And so we need to finish that meeting by scheduling that next interaction. If they say, well, I've got to talk with so-and-so. So Zach, when do you think you'll be talking with so-and-so? By the end of the week. Wonderful. Let's schedule a time to talk next Tuesday to update on your conversation with them. Get it on the calendar. If you don't, you're inviting yourself to be ghosted. You'll be chasing that deal into the next century. Get it on the calendar. If you read the situation right and they're genuinely interested in what you offer, it shouldn't be that hard to get that next meeting scheduled. If they're pushing back on scheduling that next interaction, you should be asking yourself, how real is this deal?
And if people have been listening to this and then they've got this far and they've gone, I've got loads of deals in my pipeline that I've not scheduled next steps. I've been doing things wrong. Is there a way to fix that, or is that sorry, Lee, but you're kind of upstream of there? There's no fix for this now. Is there any advice you offer to those people that maybe didn't schedule those next steps, etc.?
Yeah, and let's assume that you've tried a number of times to reconnect with them. There's a strategy, and this comes from the heart. It's called I'm confused. And it starts like this. So, Zach, I'm reaching out to you, and I got to tell you, I'm really confused, because when we got together, you shared with me that you wanted to do A, B, and C, and we talked about this, we talked about that. We give them a little bit of a history lesson. And I'm really confused because I've tried to reach out, as we had talked about, to schedule a next conversation, and I haven't heard back from you. And I'm just wondering, did I not read the situation right? Has something changed? Now, you're going to get a response to that. You may not like their answer, but you're going to get a response because it comes from the heart. Because you're saying, I'm genuinely confused. I go, you know what? All right, let me tell Jack what's going on.
So I want to leave the audience with something really, really practical. And I think that this is probably like the salesperson's kryptonite. And I thought there's no one better to ask than you, Lee, if we're looking for something universal. So I think a salesperson's kryptonite in that first meeting is when the prospect turns around and says, what makes you different to everybody else? What do I do?
You better
Lee?
know that. Well, you shouldn't have to guess that in that meeting. That's something you should know. If you've researched your industry, the players in your space, you should know what your differentiators are. And better yet, they shouldn't be asking you that question. You should be putting that on the table. So, Jack, you're probably wondering what makes us different. You know they are, even if they haven't asked you. So let's say there's some percentage that ask you the question. 100% are wondering. So let's be proactive. Let's put that on the table, because if we do that, we show that we know what they're thinking. And that further helps us to build a relationship. And that's an answer we should have developed long before we ever walked into their offices or started that Zoom meeting.
Mm. So, I mean, this might be quite nice to end it on, Lee. But if someone said to you, "What makes you different to all the other kind of sales practitioners, consultants, trainers out there?" What would you say?
Well, my specialty is differentiating what and how you sell. Okay. So are you asking me like if I was asked that by a prospect?
Yeah.
I would never let the question come up. That's my point. I would proactively say, I'm sure a question you're wondering is what makes you different? And I'll say, well, different is my theme. And depending upon what conversation we've been having, if it's around developing custom sales playbooks, if it's around a keynote, if it's around doing coaching with them, then I'm going to be able to describe why me and in the context of how it would be advantageous to them if we work together.
Nice. Lee, thank you so much for this. It's been an amazing conversation. We always end the podcast the same way. If you could leave the audience with one question that they should ask themselves, what would that be?
Well, you just touched upon it. Why you? What makes you different? And if you can't answer that question, be prepared to lower your prices because you've got two choices. You differentiate yourself or you drop your price. No one is willing to pay a penny more for something they perceive to be the same as something else. So it's differentiate or drop your price. Those are your options.
Nice. Thank you so much for joining us. If people want to find you, work with you, buy your book, how can they go about it?
So if you go to firstmeetingbook.com, you can download the first chapter of the First Meeting Differentiator, which is this guy right here, First Meeting Differentiator. It's a bestseller published by HarperCollins. Wherever you buy the book, you buy it on Amazon or wherever you like to buy your books, go back to that website, firstmeetingbook.com, and sign up for the free bonus. It's exclusively for purchasers of the book.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
Thanks so much, Lee.
Thank you.